Y'all ready?
That's a wrap, everybody.
Welcome in Fish Stripes Live on a Friday evening for the final time in the 2021 season. I'm Ethan Badowski. Small crew today. More should be popping in possibly, but it's me, it's Alex Carver, it's Isaac Azut, and it's Eli Sussman. Wrapping up this 2021 season, a slog to the finish it's been for the Marlins. I think a lot of people are kind of feeling sweet relief that we have entered the final series of the season. I know that it's been tough for a lot of Marlins fans. It's been tough for the Marlins. You heard Trevor Rogers on Jeremy Tachey's podcast, Miami Mic'd Up, talking about how this was an infuriating season for a lot of the Marlins. Obviously fell way short of expectations. You heard Craig Mish today on Swings and Mishes talking about how the entire organization expected much better, and they're all very frustrated with how this season transpired, and it's possibly leading to an aggressive offseason. And as we know, this is a defining offseason for the Miami Marlins. So let's start at the beginning, kind of, and just I don't think we've had a chance to all lay it out on the line about this season. So this is going to be our 2021 recap mixed with a 2022 preview. We've got a lot to get to today because there's a lot to talk about with what went wrong this season. And there's obviously a lot to talk about, and even more to talk about after Craig Mish's podcast today in terms of what will happen this offseason as the Marlins look to seriously improve this roster, this organization, and put out a winning product on the field for the first time in a very, very long time. Isaac Azut, I'm going to start with you. Just talk to us about what it was like coming in and where it went wrong and how quickly it went wrong this season.
Well, I mean, allegedly the front office had very high expectations for this season. I think some of us had, mediocre expectations where maybe a 500 record would be, great. But boy, just like Craig mentioned, things went to shit almost instantly in that second game of the season. And honestly, in the first game of the season when they couldn't score a freaking run on opening day and Sandy pitched brilliantly. So I think obviously they fell well below expectations. I have a nice little article coming out later about that I'm writing for myself. But it was a monstrous season. It was one of the worst seasons in franchise history. They've clinched already a top 6 pick or top 7 pick in next year's draft. And in year 4 of a rebuild, that's definitely not ideal.
Alex Carver, I know you're just as excited as anybody I know about this season coming to an end. So just talk to us, if you had to pinpoint one thing where it went wrong, where do you think it was?
Well, I mean, I say the same thing all the time, and you guys have heard me say it all the time. It's roster construction. They were so bad at it. I mean, after an overall very, not very conducive offseason, I guess, they really didn't do a lot in the offseason where Anthony Bass is your biggest signing. They like to say they reconstructed the bullpen. Well, here's the bullpen now, and you see what it is with a lot of minor leaguers in it, some doing well, some not. But overall, just failure to give up on failed projects, as I always say. I said the names many times. I don't have to say them again. But yeah, just that anti-Rays mentality of trying to just get every single ounce out of a player, even if they know they're a failure or overall failure, I guess I should say, or a replacement level player or below. That's the attitude that's got to go. And like you said, they're coming up on really wanting to win from everything that we hear, that the window opening, everything else. Get mad and go do something, man. I want to see a lot more this offseason than we saw last offseason, that's for sure.
The organization is saying all the right things on that front, right? They're telling Craig Mish that they're extremely disappointed, that they're looking to be aggressive, that this is not the product they expected. Look, clearly they missed something if they expected this to be a much better product. I mean, I think, everybody talks about how Bass had the hype video, so he was the big signing, but really the big signing of the season, of the offseason, was Adam Duvall, and it worked really well. It just didn't end well because they traded him and they didn't get a lot of value for him. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, it just wasn't enough. There was not enough done. And especially after last season. I'll get to that in a second, though. Eli, I want to go to you and kind of, obviously this has been a very disappointing season for the Marlins, and just your thoughts on the overall what happened.
Well, one thing that keeps coming to my head that I don't think gets said enough is that every major league organization, and the Marlins included, they're a lot smarter than us. They have a lot of info that we don't have. But when you do things that seem really strange and are hard to explain, and you don't get like answers for it, and then those things don't work out, then this is how we get to this situation where everybody's unhappy because we have no idea why we didn't see Bryson Brigman in the major leagues this year. We don't know why they didn't like go after some more starting rotation depth after like Gio Gonzalez got injured. I could go on and on about like all these individual decisions that seemed weird, and some of them did work out. Like when signing Duvall, I think Duvall was even better than we thought that first half of the year. But then when they make that trade, and we all raise our eyebrow about that trade, and then immediately it's clear that wow, they got hosed in that trade. That's another example of them doing things differently and it not going well. And like there are things like this every single season where major league teams make these moves and nobody understands them and they're very unpopular publicly and they don't work out. But it seems like this year more than most other years, like they're like batting average on those moves is really low.
Yeah.
That's why this feeling that we get, it doesn't necessarily carry over from one year to the next. That's kind of what I keep coming back to when thinking about this. Because on paper, a lot of people loved the hiring of Kim Ng and loved where we stood in terms of the amount of controllable young talent in the organization, guys at the major league level, guys in the farm system. And 1 year doesn't necessarily mean that they are screwed forever with this group. But just to like hammer home why people feel the way they feel this year and why it's been so demoralizing, it kind of just comes down to that of a team doing things that look really unorthodox and most of those like unorthodox decisions blowing up in their face.
Yeah. I kind of think it all goes back to, I've had this thought throughout the year about how in the end that playoff appearance may have been a net negative for the perception of this front office, right? In terms of the fact that the front office all of a sudden had all these lofty expectations on them of they were a playoff team last year. And, everybody thought it was a fluke. And of course it turned out to be because of the circumstances of the season. But at the end of the day, right, a lot of people set their expectations maybe higher than they should have been for a team in year 4 of the rebuild. But it's true that it is year 4 of the rebuild, and they're going to have yet another top 10, possibly top 5 pick. And, that didn't bother me as much earlier in the year until I saw what the San Francisco Giants did. And I looked at them and I saw a team that was supposed to be in year 2 or 3 of a rebuild, right? They move on from Madison Bumgarner. Looks like it's Buster Posey's victory tour in, he's taking one last lap around with the Giants this year. And all of a sudden they are the best team in baseball. And they're in year 2 or 3 of a rebuild, right? They never actually did it. They never traded Posey. They never traded Crawford. They never traded Belt, but they did go down a little bit. And then 2 or 3 years later, they're back in the postseason. They had a top 10 draft pick last year. And all of a sudden, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, why can't that be the Marlins, right? What are the Marlins missing that makes them not that team? Obviously, Belt and Crawford and Posey are more established veterans than the Marlins have in this organization. I don't think there's any player on the roster that is, Marte was the closest in age to all those guys, I think, in terms of players on the roster. I guess Miguel Rojas would be right there with them as well. But at the same time, I just couldn't comprehend why the Marlins couldn't be that, why it's taking them so long, why it's going to go into year 5, that this will be the defining offseason after all this time of, these trades were so long ago. And you're finally getting to see them pay off, right? Sandy finally has the big year. Jazz looks good in the first, in his first season. Pablo is, had a breakout year until he got hurt. But it was just frustrating. And you're right, Eli. I had very high expectations for Kim Ng. I'm not giving up on her. She still says a lot of the right things when you talk to her in press conferences, and clearly she's experienced enough to have the job. But she didn't necessarily do a great job in the first year. Some of the, I think Alex kind of nailed it on the head with, just not giving up on enough of these guys. And they finally started to do it towards the end of the year, right? Like Alex Jackson stopped getting any playing time, basically. Isan Diaz, Devin Marrero got called up over Isan Diaz today. As much as nobody wants to see Devin Marrero, they also didn't want to see Isan Diaz, and he got sent down in September. That's probably the end of his Marlins major league career. Who knows what's going to happen with Lewis Brinson? Jorge Alfaro doesn't seem to be in the plans in the future. Magneuris Sierra doesn't seem to be in the plans for the future. So you start to see some of these guys moving on, but it just took a little too long. I don't know that any of these decisions that needed to be made, maybe like a Bryson Brigman coming up, moving on from Isan Diaz, signing another starter when all the injuries happen. I don't know that these are make or break between a good team and what we saw, a playoff team, but they're definitely make or break between being a better team and an entertaining product. And at the end of the year, they just didn't have an entertaining product. And I think as much as you want the results to be good because it's a results-driven industry, you also want it to look pretty. And it looked so ugly at times this year that it was just hard to deal with. And it made my job hard. It made Alex's job hard. It made Isaac's job hard. It made Eli's job hard. And you saw what it did to Craig. So on Twitter, you saw what it did to Craig. So it was very frustrating. But at the same time, there is still something to be gained from this year, right? And Alex, I'll start with you. It's the rookies, right? It's the young guys coming up and producing and playing pretty well.
Yeah, when they've gotten the full shot, they've all been good. I mean, you've seen flashes from every single one of them. Jesus, hopefully he's all right with what happened last night. Lewin, really liked him. You can talk about pitchers like Okert, who kind of came out of nowhere. Bender's been doing it since the start of the year, came out of nowhere. So yeah, when these young kids have gotten their shot, they've all been good. Jazz, I mean, won the job there at the infield job, shortstop, second base. It was awesome, second base over shortstop. But yeah, he was good most of the year. Had his moments where he struggled. The defense he's got to clean up, but been really good. And those are the guys. The bigger names are the ones that you want to see, as guys that you can start to build the organization around. And that's what the Giants had. And guys like Posey and Belt and those clear-cut veterans, and they built around them. The Marlins had players like that with guys like Stanton and Yelich and JT Realmuto, and we know what they did with that. So the Marlins kind of started from the ground up, and now they have to find the guys to build around. And you see them starting to show up because I definitely think a couple of those guys that I just mentioned are players that you can definitely use to build an organization around, and there's more coming in minor leagues, as we all know. So, yeah, I mean, definitely a positive. One of few positives, I would say, from this year is how the rookies performed. I just wanted to see more of them, man.
Isaac, let's talk about Jazz. It was kind of a very interesting season. It was a rookie season, right? You could say he's going to finish somewhere in the 730 to 740 OPS range, but he had 17 homers and 20 stolen bases. So you saw a lot of the potential, but you also saw some of the downfalls. He wasn't great defensively. He's going to hit below 250 probably. Just your overall evaluation of what you saw from Jazz Chisholm this year.
I think Craig nailed it on the head. I think he's the only guy that really just established himself as like a starter on any of the 30 major league teams across baseball. I think just his power speed combination automatically just has him there. He is striking out, but he's not striking out an insane 35% like he was in the minors in AA last year. So yeah,
huge development, by the way, a huge development for him.
And like for a guy like that, if he's putting the ball in play with the speed and the power and the exit velocities, it's gonna be he'll be fine. He'll be fine. Now the only thing we all know is the defense, and holy shit, I did not see that coming. Because that guy, there's no problems in scouting reports. There's no red flags regarding his defense at shortstop. And he looked really good in spring training at second base. He looked really good in the first couple months of the season at second base. But I don't know what happened. He just could not feel the damn ground ball. And so that's definitely something that the team's gonna have to work on. It's obviously an organization thing because the Marlins led the league in errors this year. So it's not just him, but at the same time, you really want your star infielder to be able to be a good defender as well, just like Miguel Rojas is.
And it's interesting because he did make a shit ton of errors, and that's obviously, when it's that many errors, it really is a knock on a guy as a defender. But at the same time, he did have 5 defensive run saves, according to Fangraphs, so he was somewhat of an average defender, or, otherwise. He was worse at shortstop. I mean, he had -4 defensive run saves at shortstop in 260 innings, so it was really a struggle for him there. But Eli, just, do you think that is more from what you saw, at least, a downfall of his ability, or do you think it's just he's young, he's a rookie, we know he's exciting and plays with energy, and a lot of the times he was just trying to do too much?
Yeah, some of both. I mean, that's the easy answer. I was surprised by how, I'll have to actually look at the breakdown between the types of errors that he was making, but there's all sorts, and there was more than I was concerned by how many were like simple fielding in terms of actually hitting off his glove and just not having soft enough hands to make certain plays. Like those are the ones that like really make you raise an eyebrow based on everything we saw from him coming up through the system. That shouldn't be happening to him. It's a pretty big sample. So that's kind of what bothers me. And just this is one thing that goes for the whole team is that you mentioned defensive run saved and other metrics that would tell you that the Marlins as a team this entire year are, if not an average like defensive team, they might actually be a little bit above average. It's just they really irritate you because they screw up the routine plays. They make more obviously errors, traditional errors than any other team in the majors. A Jazz is like the poster boy of it, but almost at every position, that's why they lead the majors in errors by a big margin. Even though in terms of the actual defensive performance, it's been all right. And that's one reason why they don't allow that many runs, because overall, these guys actually do make a lot of plays that, aren't reflected in those traditional stats. But that's just like another reason why this season kind of drives you crazy, because it seems like a lot of individual players. It's not just a Jazz problem. It felt like a lot of individual players should have converted more outs than they did, that they have the ability to do it. And they were put in the right positions to do it in terms of actual scheming and all that stuff. And this is something, I don't know if we'll touch on this during the show, but October, not a whole lot happens transaction wise in October. The main thing that does affect is coaches. Like this is the time of year where there's a lot of coaching turnover, and Craig Mish mentioned it on Swings and Misses. And I'd have to agree that we're probably going to see quite a bit of turnover on this Marlins coaching staff because of all, just the fundamental things that went wrong for this team. And that kind of stuff that really cost them in close games and that have really shown up, especially during the second half of the season. It's hard to just point the fingers and say the talent isn't here. It's a lot of these guys, whether they weren't given the right guidance or they just weren't responding to these coaches the way they should have. Like that's probably hints at seeing a lot of turnover on that staff before 2022 for sure.
Yeah, well, the fundamentals, like you said, Eli, were extremely concerning. I mean, for a major league ball club to have that many, to lead the league in errors and base running, it's just the sign of either a club that's trying to do too much or a dumb club, right? A club that just doesn't have good fundamentals. And yeah, I definitely think that goes back to base running. That definitely goes back to fielding. Where's Perry Hill when you need him? He was like the greatest defensive fielding coach of all time.
He's in Seattle. He might make it to the playoffs and have to end their drought finally.
He deserves it. And I'm sure they're solid defensively over there because the Marlins were so good when he was here. But, taking a look at Jazz, 14 errors at second base in 730 innings. And then in 260 innings, it's shortstop. 10 errors. So he's averaging an error every 3 games, which is crazy. And should not actually less than 3 games. So that's pretty crazy. And should not be happening for a guy who I think a lot of people thought would be a really good defender. And it does raise concerns that he'll be able to stick at shortstop long term. Obviously, the Marlins with Gold Glove defense at shortstop in Miguel Rojas weren't going to switch him over there, except when he was spelling Rojas like he is today when Miggy Rowe gets a day off. But, I mean, 121 errors and the next team has 108 is just ridiculous. And it just can't be happening for, a major league club. And there are a lot of players that played this year that weren't necessarily major league quality, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, Jazz is making 10 errors in 260 innings at shortstop. It's just ridiculous. And I'm curious, Alex, have you given up on Jazz as a shortstop, or is this a legitimate concern, or do you still think, he showed pretty good defense? Like there were still some wow plays that you saw from him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, he could definitely clean it up. I haven't given up on him as a shortstop at all. Obviously, he was better at second base, but even there, he just at times that he just tries to do too much, fields the wrong hop, gets himself into a bad situation, has to make an incredible play, and then it just doesn't happen. And then, as Eli said, there are just the fundamentally bad ones where he will completely botch it. So it's something that he can definitely clean up for sure. It's going to take the right guys around him, and I think that starts with coaching, which is probably what we'll see, as Eli said, next month. Or this month, whatever. It's something that I definitely think that he can clean up. He was great all through the minors. There was no issues with him going both ways. There was really no issues with the accuracy of his arm, and that's kind of shown up this year. Obviously, it's his first full pro season or first full major league season. So I'm not giving up on it. If you have to move him to second base, it's okay. But I think he could be okay. He just needs the right guidance to do so.
The next rookie I want to move on to is a guy whose season actually came to an end today. We saw it last night. Jesus Sanchez pulls a hamstring on a swing, doesn't run out of the box, and then is removed from the game and hits the 10-day IL. Obviously, there's only 3 games left, so that'll end his season. 14 home runs in something like 250 plate appearances, hit 251 with an 808 OPS. I thought really impressive. Eli, did he convince you that he's, good enough to stick all of next season as the starting right fielder?
I'm really happy with his bat. It shows up in the stats just as it showed up just from scouting him coming up, that the exit velos off his bat are pretty special. It's like really top of the chart, at least for anybody on the Marlins team right now, and ranks really favorably across the league. And the fact that he's able to elevate it, that was probably the biggest thing, the biggest question with him in the high minors. He was kind of I know Alex isn't a fan of these guys where they make it to the high minors and they're really highly ranked, even though they don't produce a whole lot. Like his numbers at AA and AAA just weren't great. And a big reason for that is because he wasn't, elevating the ball consistently. And it's a question of whether he'd be able to do that at the major league level. And even though it's a small sample, we have the answer. I mean, he had like that 1 month stretch where over like a 30-day span, he hit like 9 home runs. And so you don't do that by accident. You do that. That's really, whether it's mechanical adjustments, getting himself into good counts, like he was able to figure out how to harness that raw power and to put it into games in a really exciting way that few guys have done for this team at any position in the last few years. That was really exciting. He's in an interesting spot in terms of his defense because they tried him in left field early in the year and he was really uncomfortable. And so down the stretch, they were playing him every day in right field. And it's interesting because the stats like him a lot. They think he was a plus defender in right field. I kind of felt differently watching him every single day. I guess we'll need like a bigger sample to know the answer from that. And that kind of, that's a question when you try to gauge what his ceiling is, right? Because I think it's clear that he could definitely be an above average hitter, if not like a great hitter. But how much of that value is he going to give back on the field? And especially if he is only stuck at one particular spot in right field. And I just think we're going to need a bigger sample, to figure that part of the game out and how much he adds in that regard, because he's got the tools to be a really good defensive outfielder. And he's had a few really great moments out there as well. But just some of the choices he makes out there are troubling to me. Some of the throws that he makes, missing cutoff guys, going to the wrong base, some miscommunication he's had with his teammates. When you talk about those really fundamental mistakes that drive you crazy, there was that one pretty infamous one where they just had a ball drop in between him and Jazz, I think it was, that really screwed the Marlins in one particular game. Like that type of stuff really drives you crazy. No doubt it was a really encouraging rookie year for him, though.
Yeah, 4 defensive runs saved in right field this year in 344 innings. I'm trying to find the error numbers here. He made 4 errors in right field this year, 5 total, so 1 in left field. And you're right, it just left field was clearly not a fit for him, right? It looked really ugly out there at times, and obviously he made some really spectacular plays in right field. You're talking to the bare hand catch. He made some nice jumping plays, some nice running plays. But yes, there were times, and that goes back to the thing with Jazz, right, where some downfalls and a lot of great stuff like the home runs and the stolen bases with Jesus looked like a rookie out there, right? And so much of the discussion like in football right now is about the rookie quarterbacks, and there's a lot of good and a lot of bad, and that's kind of what you saw from Jesus. And it's just, again, a rookie out there, and I think people forget how much growing pains rookies go through in every sport. So Isaac, overall, look, man, I think everybody is encouraged by what they saw with the bat, and especially after 1 for 29 or whatever it was in 2020, he really made some great changes this year.
Yeah, thank God. I think it was so important that this guy came out and hit because, like you guys mentioned, the minors, he had hit along every single level. Once he got to the higher levels of the minors, that's where he sort of hit like a stomping point. And now, yeah, thank God he came up and hit because they have, immediate major league ready bats. They don't have plenty of them. So that was just vital for the organization as a whole. Okay, like they got one right. He's going to come up and be the starting right fielder on opening day next year. And when you talk about the defense, we talk about that barehanded catch. The only reason he had to catch a barehanded was because he
overran it.
Because he shit the bet, he made a spectacular play out of probably should have been a casual play. But no, I'm very excited to see a fully 150 games out of him next year, and I think he can be a real he's a potential all-star in my opinion. He got the power is insane. I didn't realize how much raw power he had. He was more of a hit first guy, if I remember correctly, when he was with Tampa. Like he had the power, but he wasn't elevating the ball. And now, holy shit, that home run he had in Citi Field, for example, this weekend. Wow. So it's impressive power, and he'll be hitting the Pepsi or whatever the porch is in right field for a long time coming.
Yeah, I mean, unless there's some big changes in the lineup and some big acquisitions, I think you're looking at the cleanup hitter in next year's opening day lineup. Even some of the guys that they're talking to be in play for are more, 2-3 hitters. So I definitely think, a guy bringing the power, Jesus, and then Lewin probably right after him, which is the guy we're going to go into next.
Yeah.
And,
well, one more thing on Jesus
go
before
ahead.
we move on is just the fact that his season ending early because of an injury, what they're calling it hamstring tightness.
Yes.
Remember, he started the season late because of an injury. He had a groin injury that set him back at the start of this year, and took him out of spring training and all that. His first year in the organization in 2019, his season ended early that year, also because of a hamstring injury when he was at AAA during the 2019 season. So this is a question with him is the durability, even though he seems like a strong guy. He seems to be in shape and all that. By the eye test, you wouldn't think of him as someone that's very fragile, but he's got over the last 2 calendar years, he has at least 3 injuries that we know about, lower body injuries, none that have been severe, but all that have kept him out for some length of time. So that's always a question, and it's difficult to project that moving forward, but they have to keep that in mind when, they're putting together the necessary depth, right? So even if they really feel confident he's a starting caliber outfielder, they need to, keep in mind the possibility that if he's been injured before, he could get injured again, and you need really strong backup plan.
Yeah, no doubt. I know that, Craig Mish expressed that sentiment in his tweet last night when Jesus, it was announced that his season was probably over. Is that in order to be an everyday player, right? We had the same problem with Garrett Cooper. Everybody thinks that Garrett Cooper can hit well enough to be an everyday player, but he can't stay healthy. And it happened to him again this year. And it's part of the reason that I think a lot of us believe that he's on the way out of Miami next year. How that situation gets sorted out will be interesting. And one of the main reasons that he could be out of Miami next year is this next rookie that we're going to talk about. And it's Lewin Diaz. And this is the guy that I'm probably highest on. I really love this guy. It seems like every time the bat touches the ball, it's hit hard. And he's a pull hitter. They play him to pull a lot, but he really does use the middle of the field and the opposite part of the field well. And he really, especially with pitches that are away, we had so many problems this year where Jazz was rolling over a lot of pitches on the outside part of the plate. But Lewin did a really good job of, taking those pitches up the middle and to the opposite field. And then obviously you're talking about Gold Glove caliber defense over at first base. I watched this guy in spring training and just enthralled by him, the way he moves for such a big guy over at first base. And get this, in 231, he played 231. I guess that makes sense. He's played a lot at the end of the year this year. 231 innings, 7 defensive runs saved over at first base. So really just a high quality defense.
I hadn't actually checked that number. That is pretty.
That's a high number for a guy that hasn't played a lot this year. So Alex, he had a really nice year in AAA. He didn't hit for a lot of average, but hit for a lot of power. And I think my favorite thing about this guy is he's a very low strikeout guy.
Yeah, he's my favorite doubles first hitter for sure. He's awesome. So yeah, no, he's really good. Like you said, early in his minor league career for sure, he was really, really pull happy. That was all he did. Pull rates were over 45%, pretty much every year. And then 2020, he was with the Marlins a little bit, very, very infrequently, of course. And then in the minors this year, he really cleaned it up. And that was, I think the number was at 38 or 39%, or something like that with the pull rate. And he was going out a lot more. So like you said, starting to use a lot more of the field, which is great. I love his hands. He gets his hands to the ball really well, which gives him that ability to go to all fields. I think that's what he kind of cleaned up, was the getting extended versus pulling in. That's something that a lot of young hitters learn and polish off as they're nearing their major league, status, which he did very well. And the defense is incredible. So yeah, man, monsters power, absolutely great. And love everything that you see from him. He's definitely been a bright spot. Like to see the average tick up a little bit more, but I think that will probably work itself out. And even if it doesn't, if this guy's hitting 25, 30 home runs, he can get away with it. So he's going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, I think this guy has 40 home run potential. I think if he really hits for a lot of average on a few years, like he can really be a 40 home run guy. You're talking about one thing that's really impressed me looking at his Fangraphs page right now is his last 2 years in the Marlins organization. He's been walking more. He's never been a high walk guy, and his highest walk rate in the minors was 8.5% in Double-A last year. But he's walking more towards the end at the higher levels. So that could be something the Marlins wanted him to take more pitches. And he has really good plate discipline because he's never really struck out a whole lot at all. I mean, in the minors, his highest strikeout rate was 21.7%, above in like a real sample of games. So that's a really impressive guy for a guy, really impressive numbers for a guy that's going to hit you 30, 40 home runs at his best. I know, Isaac, that, the Marlins waited until September to really get a look at him, and it took a Jesus Aguilar injury. And obviously he was blocked for so much of the year because Aguilar was one of their better hitters. So it was hard to get him up here. But, just did he do enough? Because I know you were expressing that it's September. It's hard to say that, on opening day next year, this guy should be in the lineup. But did he do enough in this short sample size to say he should be the starting first baseman for you next year?
Yeah, it's hard to gauge September numbers, and like evaluate them correctly. But Eli made a great point a couple streams ago, which, it's not a 40-man major league roster all over baseball. They are putting out some decent, pitchers. There's not 30 guys in the bullpen anymore. So the stats that he's creating right now, at least the power is showing up, so that's something I would really take into consideration. And to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. One, just because, I think Garrett Cooper is on his way out. And so they had to make a decision based on the three of those guys in Aguilar, Cooper, and Lewin. You're obviously keeping Lewin. He has nothing left to prove in AAA. So one of Aguilar and Cooper have to go. They didn't trade Aguilar this July. So you got to assume that it's Cooper on his way out. And the only thing I would like to see more of Lewin, he only has 3 walks since September 8th, which is when he became an everyday first baseman for the team. Only 3 walks. But everything else, he's slugging 500. He's, his OPS is 772, so a little bit below 800. And the guy has really impressed me. So, yeah.
That's since he came back up.
That's September 8th. Since Aguilar's injury, that's 3 walks, and he's just playing really well. So, yeah, just in the defense alone, he should definitely be the starting first baseman next year. That defense is, wow, it's superb at first base.
Yeah,
when these guys...
We're all on the same page about him getting that opportunity moving forward, but in terms of like optimism about him getting the hits to go along with the power, this is where I'm like a little bit worried. He hits everything in the air, everything, and he gets underneath the ball so much. Like they quantify this now on Baseball Savant too, where they can show you like how often a guy gets underneath it, and you could see it just in his like average launch angle. It's one of the highest in baseball. So I think he's a guy that if he continues to be this type of hitter, he's going to hit those home runs, but he's going to be a low BABIP, a low batting average guy as well, because he's going to hit a lot of pop-ups. There will be all these fly balls that not all of them are going to get out. Most of them are not going to get out, even if he's super powerful, which makes it all the more important that he draws those walks when they come to him. When he gets more, he'll need to be more selective just generally with his pitches if he's going to be this type of guy. So like you can make this work if you're selective and you're only swinging at the pitches that you really feel you can get on the barrel. Then that'll work itself out. Like there's definitely a path for him to do that. We know that he's like given a little bit of defensive versatility because they tried experimenting with him as a left fielder as well. But like, no matter what, he's going to be at a position where the standard to be like an everyday starter, it's a really big offensive burden. You can't just be an average hitter. You need to be an above average major league hitter to like qualify for everyday playing time, considering, what that position demands, which means we could be pretty critical, nitpick his offensive game because even with his defense, like as you said, it's been awesome as well. That being said, he's in a complicated spot at this moment. If he's going to be this player moving forward, he'll need to like make these other little adjustments. But like I said, we're all on the same page that he at least should be getting that opportunity, especially because he has so many more years of control left too. Like if they hit on him, if he takes little steps forward, then you have that position set for the next half decade, which would be awesome.
What I mentioned on him.
Go ahead.
What I mentioned on him about his field coverage getting better, it definitely has. A number that has gone down, which Eli just mentioned, is the line drive rate. Line drive rate early on in his minor league career was always in the 20% range, and now it's like 17, 16%. So you love that he creates launch angle, but does he create too much? I think he kind of does because he hits everything in the air. So
looking at it right now, Alex. Sorry,
what's that?
55% fly ball rate.
Yeah,
in the
ridiculous.
majors this year, 13.6 line drive and
Yeah.
30.9 ground ball. So more than half of the balls he puts in play are going in the air. It's crazy.
For sure.
Isaac, what were you?
No,
what were you
Alex
something
basically hit on exactly that. I was just gonna
Yeah.
say because in his 2020 cup of coffee in the big leagues, that 6 for 39 that he had, that was exposed. He was just popping everything up to the third baseman. It was really bad. And I think honestly, from my naked eyes, who gives a shit about that? But from what I've seen, he's spraying the ball to the other side. He's hitting more line drives, some more ground balls. But you're right, Eli. He is hitting the ball in the air, and it's astounding amount. Like you just said, 55%, and that's it's not going to equate to high batting averages, which he's going to need to have at least a 260 hitter. He's going to have to be at least a 260 hitter, you'd think, to remain successful. But hopefully that's something that can be improved.
It's funny that you guys mentioned the walks and the pop-ups because I was having a discussion on Twitter about Lewin the other day with Marcelo DeVivo, and the two things he mentioned were he wants to see him walk more and he wants to see him pop up less. So those are the two big things I think for Lewin. But here's the most encouraging thing I think about these rookies, and this is where we'll kind of put a bow on this. Jazz struggled in 2020. Jesus 1 for 29. Lewin 6 for 30 or whatever the number you just said was, right? And then all 6 for 39, I think, something like that, right?
6 for 39, yeah.
Comes up, all three of them come up this year, and we're talking about them as they're all penned in, I would say, into the starting lineup for 2022 on opening day, right? Jazz is 100% the starting second baseman. We all think that Jesus is the starting right fielder, and Lewin is probably going to be the starting first baseman because Aggie's going to start at DH if everything goes as assumed. So for all the talk about the Marlins lacking in the hitting development department, Eli, what does it say about these rookies that they were able to make these adjustments and become productive MLB players?
It's I guess it's a nicer tone with this than we had even a month and a half ago when we spoke to JJ Cooper at Baseball America, when there's no good stories at that moment aside from Jazz offensively. So it's good that Lewin and Jesus have given us mounting evidence that it's possible to translate to the majors. I mean, that being said, I think we could be happy with what they've done while also saying that, realistically with this team, that these guys are still well short of being even kind of in that realm of a franchise player. And I know that's a ridiculous standard to set on any one player, on any one person. But when you look around the division and that the Braves have that guy in Acuna, and that the Nationals have that guy in Soto, and that the Phillies even have that guy, even though he's older now, and Bryce Harper, that there's still no candidate with that coming up. And it's on my mind because the season's about to end. I'm going to update my prospects list again. And even though I think any way you slice it, it's a good farm system, there's nobody that I really love. There's nobody that I'm really confident in even being a candidate for being that perennial all-star kind of guy. And that's reflected in, top prospect lists that you've seen with the Marlins. Ever since this rebuild started, there have been times when Sixto showed that kind of upside in him. And I mean, that's really it. During these past few years, they're still missing that one, no doubt franchise player. And even with these really nice developments, I think that's one thing that's still not really in sight for them, that naturally makes people wonder exactly where the light at the end of the tunnel is, unless you have, even if you have you can fill all these positions. You could fill first base internally. You could fill right field. They have answers now at most of these positions outside of center field and catcher. The upside of the team is still really limited unless you get awesome production at any one spot. And so that's going to be the farm system. As I said, I don't think they're going to address that internally anytime soon. It puts a lot of pressure on this offseason, as I'm sure we'll get to on this show. We'll get to over the coming months about the pressure of trying to find somebody like that from another team to really raise the ceiling of the team, because it's limited for the time being, unless it's not enough just to have answers at every position. You need to have a great answer at least one or two of them.
Yeah. This will be where we kind of wrap up 2021. I'm going to go to Alex in a second because we've talked about Brian De La Cruz. We've talked at length about Sandy and Trevor and Pablo and Lazardo and whatever. So I don't really think we need to recap that there. But Alex, obviously, from the hitting perspective, disappointing year on the farm, right? Except for a select few names, but especially at the higher levels. At the lower levels, it looked a little better. And so, I saw that on Twitter that the 2019 international class had Salas, Capet, and Ian Lewis, I think was the other one. And then there's also Khalil Watson came in from the draft this year, hit really well. Ben Hostetler came in from the draft this year, hit really well. So when Eli talks about that all-star, perennial all-star player, right? That Juan Soto, that Ronald Acuna type. I don't necessarily think it's in the farm system yet because those guys were, ranked as top prospects right when they were signed. But who could be that guy that's perennial all-star level in the system right now at the lower levels? Because it doesn't seem like it's going to, these guys might make all-star teams, but when you're talking about a real elite answer like Eli was just mentioning, I think it's more likely to come in the form of a Salas, a Watson, or somebody down there. So who do you see as that answer?
Yeah, I mean, if you had to pick one, and these kids are young kids, it's hard to say, as you said, that they're going to turn into, who knows what they're going to turn into. They could be something and they could be nothing. So it's hard to say that they have that in the lower levels. But if you want to pick a guy to bet on, that I would personally bet on, that I really like, is Jose Salas, just because of everything that he's showing at such a young age. He shows power, shows his defense, shows the glove, can run a little bit. I think that kid's going to be good, especially as he puts on weight. Already has power, but he's really small he's 18 years old. So of course he's really small, but he could grow into even more power. I think right now, as is, he has potential for 20 plus homers. So if he grows into more, then there you go. And he plays premium defensive positions. I think he will eventually move to third base personally, but he can play second base and shortstop. So, I mean, that's what you want. And that's a guy that you could bet on to be a guy that could be an everyday opening day starter with good power, the potential for 5 tools. He just has to put it all together and grow advantageously with the system. Will he do that with what is currently here in terms of development? That's what's going to need to be addressed, I think, in the offseason. And I think it will be. You talk about the major league level with coaches. I think it definitely will be addressed at the developmental standpoint of hitting. Pitching, they're fine. Hitting, it needs to be addressed because of everything that we saw this season. So, yeah, if they develop him properly, I think Salas could be a guy that grows very advantageously and could be one day that everyday all-star potential player if you want to pick one within the system right now.
I'm so glad you said him because that's my guy, right? I've told you guys that I think that's the one. If they have one, I think it's him. Yeah. 10.3, when you talk about like numbers at the lower levels, right? Obviously, like take those with a grain of salt. But when you look at the numbers that the Acuñas, the Tatises, the Sotos of the world put up at these levels, like that's kind of what Salas did at the Florida Complex League. 163 weighted runs created plus, 370 average, OPS at 969. Went up to high A for the last 27 games of the year. Hit 250, only 85 weighted runs created plus, but he didn't strike out a whole lot, and he walked at a pretty good rate for a 18-year-old kid. He just turned 18 a few months ago. And, I mean, look at how skinny he is in that picture. So this kid, he didn't hit for a lot of power once he got up to high A, low A, Jupiter. But as we know, the old Florida State League, never been hitter friendly, never been power friendly, especially. So really interested to see how he starts next year at Jupiter, because I think if you're talking about one, that's the guy. And that is, looking ahead a little far, but I mean, you got to start thinking about it because again, some of these guys at the higher levels came up short this year. There's really no other way around what happened. And that leaves a lot of question marks about 2022, which is where I'm going to transition to now. And, I think a lot of us thought that Blade and Burdick had chances to play in the major leagues this year. Obviously, that didn't happen. Some of us thought Max Meyer, that was a bit of a longer shot just because of how they handle pitchers. That didn't happen as well. He had a And that's not about his performance, right? He had a great year, and he's pitching again in Jacksonville tonight. But these prospects just did not come up to the point where you can pencil any of them into the 2022 opening day lineup. I think the only one that really has a shot is Peyton Burdick. Blade will definitely repeat AA. I think Burdick, Kim Ang is on the record saying they would like him to start in AAA next year. So that leaves a lot of holes in this 2022 lineup. And there are 2 players guaranteed to be on the roster next year as of this moment. And one of them just happened because Miguel Rojas' vesting option was activated when he hit his 500th plate appearance a couple weeks ago. It's him and Anthony Bass, everybody's favorite reliever, Anthony Bass. So there's a whole lot to be figured out in the bullpen and in the starting lineup next year. Obviously, it's just a formality because all these young guys, Jazz, Jesus, Lewin, they'll all be on the roster because they'll get, the way contracts work. But there's still a lot of questions to be answered. And so, Isaac, obviously, it's center field, it's catcher. But if, one priority this offseason, where would you put it?
Honestly, they're just both such glaring holes, both of those positions. And those are like the premier positions that you have on a baseball team. But I would think catcher is a bigger hole, unfortunately, and I would say center field is a very, very, very close second. But I'd put more emphasis on the catcher position. I know that Kim Ang and company are going to do all they can to get a center fielder, whether it's Buxton for a year or whoever it might be, or Reynolds. But they really need to figure out catcher, and they need to figure out a long-term catcher. You guys mentioned we don't have that, that perennial all-star guy that's come up. On the pitching side, we have 3 of them. So with that, to go along with that, it would be really ideal to have a Jacob Stallings kind of guy. I know he's an okay guy offensively, but I would really put a lot of emphasis on that catcher position. Wilson Contreras, if you could have a deal with him lined up, I would go right away. Just someone that, is your catcher 6 days of the week, would do so many good things for this team on the pitching side and on the offensive side. And then, center field, they have to figure something out. Brian De La Cruz in a pinch could be your little center fielder when, your star center fielder is injured or needs a day off, but you need one. You need a Brian Reynolds. You need a star out there.
I'm curious because I think everybody's been so focused on center field because there are bigger names out in center field. Yeah. So, Eli, I'm curious if you agree that catcher is the bigger priority, or if you think center field is a bigger priority than catcher.
I could probably ramble about this for quite a while because I really don't have a good answer to that. The difference being the best center fielders potentially available, somebody like Brian Reynolds. If you dream about a Ketel Marte trade, something like that, those guys are potential 5-win players, wins above replacement over the course of a full year, maybe even 6. And as we've seen with the catcher position, that almost doesn't exist anymore because catchers are being not babied, being maintenanced differently than ever before. You just don't catch as many games as you used to due to concerns about your longevity and all that stuff. So even guys like JT Realmuto at his best, all things considered, you'd have to go to intangible value maybe that goes into that. It's a tough question. So over the course of a full year, if that outfielder stays healthy, he has more opportunities to impact the game. At the same time, the question you're always asking as a team is the difference between one choice and another. It's all about the difference between this player or your next available option. And it's how much of a difference is between them. It's not about grading the player in a vacuum. It's about the difference between that player and the alternatives. For the Marlins, all their catchers are question marks. As much as we've liked some moments we've seen down the stretch from Nick Fortes, even Peyton Henry and all that, I think you automatically have to go into next year saying maybe they're replacement level guys at best. That has to be the baseline for them. So it doesn't take a whole lot to improve a lot in that category, right? So that's why somebody like Jacob Stallings is so appealing, even though Jacob Stallings isn't the flashiest player. I don't think he's ever going to be an all-star. He would make a big difference because he's in his sleep. He's going to win you several games that you're not winning now, especially with his way of blocking pitches. And for a Marlins staff that has nasty stuff that could be difficult to handle, I think he's a particular guy. We got to credit Craig Mish. He's the one that singled him out, and you could see why, because he's a really nice compliment to what they're doing. with the outfield, they'd have so many of these options that I kind of like. You know how I feel about DLC. I really like what Peyton Burdick has done this year, and he has good potential upside, although still some question marks as to whether he'll be able to get the strikeout rate down enough at the major league level and all that. Where I think between them, maybe JJ Bleday figures it out. Like they have enough scenarios where you could see them getting solid production from their current outfielders. But it goes back to what I mentioned a minute ago about how like there are potential all-stars available in the outfield, whether it's those trade candidates, whether it's somebody like you move things around and make Nick Castellanos like your right fielder and move one of those other guys in the center, and then you get several new wins over there. Like there's a lot more options on the outfield at this moment than there are with catcher. I think just because of the scarcity of catchers, how hard it is to find good catchers these days. I guess if I had to pick one, I would go with catcher. That if you find the perfect guy, whether it's Stallings at a reasonable price, there really aren't even a whole lot of other options that are realistically available. But if they find one, like that makes a really big difference. And ideally, it's somebody. If you get Wilson, the dream is Wilson Contreras, getting him, extending him. Like that's the dream. That's the one that would really put them in a great spot this year and for years to come if they get that extension done. That takes a position of uncertainty and all of a sudden makes it a strength. That'd be huge.
Something that's actually cool, like if you were to trade for Wilson Contreras, this isn't like an old regime. This isn't a situation where players tend to not want to stay. A lot of players have expressed they're wanting to stay here. So it would be like not a safe bet, but it'd be like, okay, like it'd be a good chance that, hey, he sees what's going on. He sees Sandy's locked up. He sees the guys and he's like, okay, this is somewhere I'd be down to extend. So maybe that's something that like would make the Marlins want to trade for him a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm enjoying watching Brian De La Cruz, it seems like, just form into the picture right behind you, Eli. It kind of looks like the Death Star forming back there.
I have no idea why that's happening, man. This is whatever.
He's just always over your shoulder, just looming in the background.
Yeah, it's trying to put on the green screen, even though I'm not in my green screen spot. Thank you.
Hilarious. Anyway, Alex, are you willing to make the other argument that center field? I kind of agree, right? Because the drop off between what they could have at catcher and what they have in the system is much steeper. And I hadn't really thought about this before. Is much steeper than the drop off between what they could get in center field and what they have. So, are you willing to make the other argument, or do you agree that catcher is the higher priority?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, but I think that the best argument is the one that you just said, that catcher is the more position of need system wide, because, as much as we've liked what we've seen from Fortes, I think that guy could be a very solid backup. And Peyton Henry, he's with the powers, looks good as well. Obviously you traded for him, so they saw something there, right? So yeah, those guys are both good. But then after them, you look at the system and there isn't a lot. I mean, Will Banfield has been not good. He's been just
dreadful,
straight up, just not good.
Yep.
So, yeah. And then beyond him, there are a few. You can make a case for like some of the really young kids down in like DSL and stuff like that, like Ronald Hernandez. But how far away is that? That's a long ways away. So, yeah, center field's the one you need. You really, really need to have center field first. Catcher is the one that you need.
Yep.
And then center field is the one that you can kind of look at system wide and say they definitely have some potential there. Obviously, they trained Bleday and Burdick to have that versatility, so that could be a thing in the future. They've both been okay there. So yeah, I mean, definitely catcher is the overall organizational position of need. With the names that Eli brought up with Castellanos, I don't know. I tend to say no. I mean, I love what Ang said about they're going to have money to spend, which is good to hear. The guy that I was looking at, you're probably going to get to this later, but the guy that I was looking at more realistically was like Michael Conforto. That could be another option for sure for the Marlins in terms of free agent center fielders if they don't trade for one. I personally think that they should put more stock with what they're going to trade into trading for a catcher, and maybe sign the center fielder in free agency if you can't find that perfect deal. Like we're talking about with the Pirates. So yeah, that's what I think. I definitely think catcher first, but center field is definitely a need right now because as much as I love Burdick, I don't think I think he could get a chance in spring training, but I don't know. They have to sign a center fielder for sure. I think Burdick may get a shot in the corner, maybe if they don't sign a guy there. Well, who knows?
Since
Go
ahead.
You know, everybody really loves Jacob Stallings, but he only had 92 weighted runs created plus this year. He only had 93 last year, and he only had eight home runs this year.
What did
And he's
Alfaro
only
have?
got like, well, yes, of course, it's a significant improvement, right? But Wilson Contreras should be the real option they go
Of
after
course.
here. I mean,
I agree.
I'm looking at these numbers, man. This is such a good player. And I mean, look, I've watched a lot of Willie over the years, and I love this guy. He's a high energy guy. He brings a swagger to the game that it's an intangible. It's something that you can't really measure, but he's just fun. And one thing that really improved this year, he's a good defensive catcher. 72%, 72nd percentile in framing this year. So he's really improved significantly in that regards. And I think that was actually like the biggest concern for him. But career 806 OPS, 114 weighted runs created plus career hitter. He hit 108 this year, 773 OPS this year, and he had 21 home runs. That's the guy that you really like. If you're going to pursue a catcher and you're going to use a lot of assets on him, that's the guy that I think you should
A hose behind the plate.
Yeah,
too.
and he's got an
hose.
absolute cannon. I mean, he's for the Cubbies, like he was so fun to watch, and I mean, obviously you saw what they did in July, and they're in full teardown mode, and I don't know if they're going to try and extend him this offseason and he's going to be the guy they build around, but it would make a lot of sense for them to move on from him. I think at this point, the Marlins, apparently the holdup in the offseason was Peyton Burdick, and a lot of people, cut them some slack. I don't know if they would give them the same slack if that's the holdup again. And also, I think I might side more with the fact that maybe they should move Burdick for Contreras after seeing this year, and especially if they're going to go out and make an upgrade in center field or in left field. And I guess since we're there, we might as well just talk about it, right? The news of the day is that Craig Mish reported that the Marlins, we don't know how seriously, we don't know to what extent, but they've had discussions about Nick Castellanos. He thinks it's a guy that they would seriously consider in free agency this offseason. And Alex, you've got to run, so I'll get you out of here on this. Castellanos, for me, he's the dream signing, I think. So if they make one signing, one acquisition this offseason, if it's one guy, who would be at the top of your wish list?
Yeah, if it's a free agent signing, I agree. I really like this guy. I think he could definitely be good. I think he's doubles first. I've hated that term recently, but I think he's doubles first for sure, especially at Lone Depot Park. But a guy that could definitely be solid, plays good defense, and seems like a team player. So I like him, man. I think he's a local kid too, if I'm not mistaken. So
yep.
I like him. So for sure would be awesome. I mean, if the Marlins can persuade him to come play at Lone Depot Park, we heard a Rom said earlier in the year about him like hating playing at bigger stadiums. So, I mean, if they can persuade him to come here and play here, that's the dream signing. I love that Craig said that, but when I realistically look at it, I gotta say, man, it's going to take a lot to convince him. So if they can do it, that says a lot about a guy wanting to play here after everything that's gone on with him. So yeah, if we can get him, then that's a great sign for the future of the team. And that's a guy that could stick around in center field for a while. I think he could be really good. So yeah, that's the dream signing, but my, I guess, pessimistic, like looking at things reality based, judging based, being a fan and working around this team for as long as I have, it would probably be somebody, like I said, like Conforto. But man, that's the dream right there. Contreras is the catcher, and then Castellanos as a center fielder. Both is, I think, a definite pipe dream. But I mean, either one of those guys would definitely be a welcome addition for sure at either position. But yeah, both those guys I think could be great. But I just wanted to say, I do have to go, but I just wanted to say these have been super cool. I said this last time, but I'll say it again. You guys always invite me on, and it's cool to be here with you guys. So I'm going to miss these. I'm not going to miss 2021, but I'm going to miss doing these. These are cool. Eli put a great thing together. So thanks again, guys. Thanks, Eli, for having me. Isaac, you've been great to meet this year. And Ethan, as always, you're fantastic. Yep. So I love
We've
you guys.
appreciated your presence. Yeah.
Of course. Well,
we really
we'll talk again for sure.
No doubt. Appreciate you, man. Enjoy the off season, and sweet relief that this season is coming to an end for Alex Carver. A great guy, and as again, follow Fish on the Farm. They do great stuff. They cover the Marlins farm system better than anybody. And Alex is just a great guy. We've loved having him around and bringing not only his minor league coverage, but his major league coverage as well, which has been great. So to get back into it, not to get derailed, we'll get emotional later in the show about how great these streams have been. But just Castellanos, Isaac, I mean, it's perfect, right? It's pretty perfect. It's a local kid. It's not a hometown kid, right? He's from West Broward.
Right.
But just hearing that it's even on the table that they're talking about that kind of player, it just makes you feel a little better, doesn't it?
Ethan, I'm totally with you that this guy, this player, this pure hitter who has power would be a dream signing for the Marlins. It's going to cost $100 million. It's going to cost 80, 70. It's going to cost a lot of money. But he is someone that you're going to put in your number 3 spot, number 4 spot in your order for the next 3-4 years. That would be the dream. You get him and you get a good catcher, whether it's even if you go like a lesser extent like Stallings or Yan Gomes, if you get Wilson Contreras, you've added 2 immense pieces, both on defense and offense. I know Castellanos isn't the best fielder or anything. I don't think you'd put him in center field. But
no, he would be a left fielder probably.
Right, yeah. I don't think you put him in center field. But that bat in that lineup, he's just one of the best pure hitters. And like you said, a doubles hitter in Comerica when he was with the Tigers. Crushed it when he was with your Cubbies, and he never doesn't hit and
revitalized that offense.
Now, unfortunately, I don't see that. I think I spoke about it with Eli before the show. It's a bit of a pipe dream. I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does, I'll know. Okay, this team is serious. And Craig did say they feel immense pressure for 2022. So if they do, go send the best hitter available, and that's what they should do.
Yeah. Alex brought up the really interesting point I was thinking about how he hated Comerica. Yeah. I don't really think Lone Depot Park is like to that extent because it's 420 to center field there. But it's certainly not Great American Ballpark. He hit 33 home runs this year. He would not do that in Marlins in Lone Depot Park. He would definitely be more like those 36, 46, 58 doubles he had in 2019 between Detroit and Chicago. It was insane. I think it was pretty close to like the all-time record, if I remember correctly. He almost had a 60 double season. He is a doubles hitter that's in a home run ballpark this year. So he's hit 33 home runs compared to 37 doubles this year. That would obviously skew more double heavy in Lone Depot Park, but yeah, I mean, man, he is just, I've talked about this, a dream for the Marlins. He would be the exact kind of player they need to really bring something to this offense. And Eli, I'm curious, Craig said there was possibly a mutual interest. They, had some discussions when he was here that there could possibly be an interest there. So how realistic do you think it is?
Well, so one thing you brought up that I guess is kind of unknowable is exactly how he feels about being in this park. I mean, for one, this would be even bigger, presumably, than the contract he's already on, probably his last big contract, knowing that he's a corner outfield guy. Like, he'd be realistic about it, that this is going to be his biggest payday. And so maybe those like other factors don't matter, right? Like, if it doesn't matter all that much what your individual numbers are going to be, if really, most of your money is going to come on this contract anyway, right? Just go to the team that pays you the most, and then you just work your hardest from there to try to put up those numbers and don't worry about it. So the thing with Lone Depot is that it continues to play super pitcher friendly, as we've seen, even though they brought in the fences. So the one thing that I guess Castellanos didn't like about Comerica is that, like, literally it was just a big park and you'd feel that you would hit the ball a certain distance and it's a home run everywhere else but not in Comerica. In Miami, if you hit the ball a certain distance, it's going out just as it would elsewhere, but it doesn't play that way for whatever reason. Like, the ball just doesn't carry quite the same way in Lone Depot Park as it does in most other places. So I don't know how he feels about that. Like, the fact that Lone Depot is just not a super deep park, so maybe he's fine with it, but just the reality that it is still really pitcher friendly. It's like, it's a different perception, certainly, than Comerica has. The one detail that Mish didn't bring up and that we haven't brought up here yet is that, so when he hit free agency the last time, he was not eligible for that qualifying offer. He was traded in the middle of the year. So the Reds were able to sign him without giving up a draft pick compensation. And there's one thing that the Marlins do well as an organization, it's develop pitching, and also they get really good value in the draft. So they would be really protective under most circumstances about giving up a draft pick, giving up bonus pool money in order to sign a guy. And this is where it just comes to how badly do you want it, right? If we're to go by Mish's report that they have an urgency to win, tremendous pressure to win, then you would think that's worth giving up your future. I think would be a 3rd-round draft pick in order to sign the guy. You need to pay him his full contract, and they would need to give up in the last year of the CBA. I think they would be required to give up like their 3rd-round draft pick or something to sign him. And that's a move that they wouldn't have made in the last couple of years. But if they do sense that they need to make a big splash and they know that this guy fits pretty well. I mean, the question is exactly how well he fits into their roster, that's up for debate, but no doubt he makes them a lot better. If they feel that urgency, then this shouldn't be an obstacle. But I did want to bring it up just because of the team. The team is really, they hug their draft picks. They don't hug all their prospects, but they definitely hug their ability to make draft picks. And that's probably one reason why they're not all that panicky about the fact that the team is going to get a really high draft pick at the start of next year's draft. That's one aspect that I'll be just really curious to see how they weigh all those factors.
Yeah, and if if that's the case, and I'm sure there are going to be some detractors in the organization, and this is supposedly a collaborative operation, but at what point does somebody get so impatient with losing? Mr. Derek Jeter guy over there, Hall of Famer, 4-time World Series champion, right? At what point does somebody get so fed up with losing that they just say fuck it and they pull the trigger on a big signing like this? And obviously, Craig said he's going to be asking for $20 million. They should have $40 to $50 million in payroll this year to grow. So that's taking up half what we think they'll have available. It would be a great signing, obviously. And if they're really that serious about it, they really feel that much pressure to grow. I don't understand why they wouldn't do it. It seems like, unless they get a bid, right? I think that's the thing in my eyes, is probably what is makes it the least likely, is that somebody's going to come in and see a superstar hitter, somebody with big money, and throw all the money at him and he'll take it. I think that's what makes them the least likely, because obviously they can't match up against a big money team that comes to try and do that, or even a team that's just wants to be a contender next year and is going to get reckless with their spending and throw a ton of money at a guy. I think that's the biggest, a roadblock in their plan, I would say. But other than that, yeah, I mean, of course, that's how it is with low revenue teams. It's a shame, but other than Castellanos, the question I had for you, Eli, is if there's one area, and Isaac, I'll ask you this too. If there's one area that people don't really talk about that needs to be improved, that you would like to see them make a move at next year, one position, one part of the team, what would it be?
I've turned quite a bit on this in, I guess, over just the last month or so, that it is like a requirement for them to do something about the infield depth, and specifically, third base, shortstop, second base need to have a really strong fallback plan. Almost like see it as like 4 guys for 3 spots between BA, Miguel Rojas, Jazz Chisholm, and a 4th guy. You need like another player almost at that level, primarily to protect against this BA situation. For people that aren't familiar, he underwent shoulder surgery on his left shoulder just a couple weeks ago, and he should be ready to play for spring training, ready for opening day. But we've seen some horror stories in terms of guys coming back from that shoulder surgery the following year. I mean, the most prominent example being Cody Bellinger. I believe that was a pretty similar procedure that what BA just had to repair basically a separated shoulder. Yeah, and Bellinger, as we know, I think even casual fans are aware that he's probably the biggest underperformer in all baseball this year. Just not the same guy, even though he's presumably healthy and he's been active for the vast majority of the year. That's an extreme case, but it's not the only one.
He has guys, 47 weighted runs created plus this year.
Yeah, the numbers are just it's hard to wrap your mind around.
He's been worse than Magneuris Sierra.
Yes.
MVP Cody Bellinger.
So as much as I'm a big fan of BA, as much as I've advocated for them to extend his contract, I think the shoulder surgery kind of changes everything, where he's a guy that could be an above average third baseman, as he has been for most of his career, but it's hard to trust him entirely. And we just know that at this stage of Jazz's career, he still has some question marks and some limitations. And on the other end, at this stage of Miguel Rojas's career, when he's going to be a 33-year-old, there's not a whole lot of guys that play shortstop every single day at age 33. It's like Brandon Crawford, and that's about it. And that guy's kind of more of an outlier than the norm. They entering this year, the kind of player I'm thinking about entering this year for them was John Birdie, and I was pretty high on John Birdie entering this year, and it went badly. Like, he played badly any way you slice it, and then he had this concussion that's also something today that was made official. He's not coming back this year from his concussion. Now on the 60-day IL. It wiped out the entire second half of his season. He himself is in his 30s. We have no idea what to expect of Birdie, and they need somebody to basically replace Birdie, but also be a much better version of him. Mainly some guy that could hit and play multiple infield positions. Third base, ideally, like all those spots, but at least third base and something else. They need like another good bat, because you just realistically, guys get hurt and you are going to have these at-bats available. And that was one thing that really screwed them over this year, is their infield depth. They called up Jose Devers in May, which was unfair to everybody involved. And they traded for Joe Panic this year, and this year they're finishing up with Eddie Alvarez as an everyday player. There are other options in the system, and they all kind of suck. They don't have this good fallback plan for when these other infielders get injured. So the names that come to mind to me, I haven't gone all the way in detail about this, but Eduardo Escobar is someone who I wanted them to trade for during the year, and he's going to be a free agent. He kind of fits the bill pretty perfectly. A big run producer and an extremely well-liked teammate that plays basically all those spots, but mainly third and second. I brought up this name earlier, and he's been like slumping really badly ever since. But Jonathan VR Reunion, he's come back to earth since then. But he played third base for most of this year with the Mets, and he was pretty good for them. And by all accounts, like, he was one of the few things that went right for them. He's going to be a free agent again. We know the Marlins, they paid him, like, they committed to paying him about $8 million a couple of years ago, thinking that he was going to be. They really liked him for a lot of reasons, and I don't think they were totally wrong. You know, he had a bad year for them, but then he bounced back, and he's still somewhat in the prime of his career. And who's the other guy? Kind of a half step below them is Josh Harrison, who is finishing up this year with Oakland A's, who was an all-star really early in his career with the Pirates, and he's been kind of inconsistent, but he's had yet another bounce back. Someone that's extremely versatile, and like above all else, he's just a good hitter, and they need more good hitters and can't be too picky about the positions.
Yeah, I'm glad you went into this infield discussion, because I think there are a lot of questions about Brian Anderson heading into 2022, Isaac. And I'm curious, Miguel Rojas, Eli mentioned, 33 years old, and a lot of people want the Marlins to go out and sign a shortstop. Maybe you make Miggy the everyday third baseman. Maybe you turn him into that utility role, right? I'm curious, would you consider that shortstop signing, or would you even consider a third base signing? Maybe BA heads into that utility role. I'm just curious what you think about what
100%. I mean, tough to go after Eli's great answer over there. But regarding infield, yeah, like you said, in the upper levels of the minors, all their infield options suck. They have nothing there. Even Bryson Brigman is your best guy, and he's a utility guy at best. So I would definitely. It's tough because they love Miguel Rojas, and I think it's sort of a biased shortstop thing that Jeter, he wasn't willing to trade him. He's not going anywhere, even though he could have probably netted a decent return. But I think they definitely need to go. I know all the talk is in the outfield, all the talk is at catcher. They could definitely use someone at third base. And I didn't realize that about Cody Bellinger. I do know that shoulder surgeries are often sketchy. And BA, he was inconsistent this year, and it's a tough thing, because you want him to just be like the starting third baseman next year. But you cannot put all can't put all the eggs in that basket, unfortunately. So yeah, I would definitely say I think Eduardo Escobar would be a perfect fit. Switch hitter, and he just he'll hit and he can play multiple positions. A guy like that would be great. But this was also someone, even without the surgery, I think Brian Anderson was someone you could maybe extend and buy low on. But now with the surgery, I don't think that's something that'd be very smart. And I don't think Kim Ng before the season was like, oh, we want to see more of him. And I don't think BA unfortunately was able to do anything that would change her mind on that. So it's going to be a very, very interesting offseason, to say the least.
You want one more fun fact about BA and Bellinger? is the same surgeon, the exact same surgeon that did the procedure on Bellinger is the one in LA.
Maybe they should find him another surgeon.
The same surgeon that also worked on Sixto Sanchez. You know, he is world renowned. Dr. Neil El Atrache. He's based in LA. Just pointing that out. Coincidence.
Yep, very, very interesting. Certainly, maybe a bit concerning, but after seeing how Bellinger's surgery went, but no, I, even before the surgery, I'm asking if the Marlins want to upgrade from Brian Anderson. I think Brian Anderson is a solid player, and if they go into him, into the season with him as their 5th or 6th best hitter, I think they're doing pretty solid. But it would take a very nice bounce back from him. He had a lot of good moments this year. He's a solid hitter. He can use all parts of the field. We know what kind of player he is when he's at his best. I'm not sure he's any better than the good stuff that we've seen from him. And at that point, it leaves you wondering, could they go out and I think we would consider Escobar an upgrade, right? Like, I think if they signed Escobar after being an all-star, obviously he was on the Diamondbacks. So, but went over to the Brewers is helping them out. Like, I kind of think you're looking at, in that situation, like Brian Anderson would hit the bench, right, Eli?
Again, my preference is like to just have real depth there to like not trust to 4 guys in 3 spots really, and keep BA, because at this point I don't think they're going to trade him. It'd be trading really low on him. And I mean, the complicated spot is that he's expected to be ready to play. You just don't know what version of him you're getting. And I mean, the big name that we could drop at third base when you're talking about this exact type of player, the richest rich man's version of it is someone like Jose Ramirez from Cleveland, who has 2 years left on his deal.
People love this guy.
I think they're both team options. I mean, he is like, I think you'd have to say, I'll have to go through the whole list, but I think pretty much every year he's, if not the best third baseman in baseball, he is top 2 every year with like Arenado. He does everything well. He doesn't do anything perfectly, but he's a great hitter, a great power hitter, a great base runner, still really good at third base. And early in his career, he did play multiple spots. He played some shortstop. He played a lot of second base. And he's on a Cleveland team that's at a crossroads in their organization where they're super cheap, but their farm system is not nearly in the same spot that the Marlins are. And they don't have a whole lot of help for him. I mean, they had Harold Ramirez, my boy, batting cleanup for them for a lot of this season in Cleveland. They might be on the precipice of a rebuild, and he's the big chip that would allow them to jumpstart that. The Marlins are one of the few teams that have a really deep package of prospects that like can actually make a deal work. So, I mean, he would be the absolute dream version of it.
At that point, you could put Miguel Rojas on the bench, honestly. If BA is healthy and he shows it, I think Miguel Rojas is someone that would be like the best utility guy in all of baseball.
Yeah, it just goes back to what I mentioned earlier about the fact that there's a scenario where the Marlins can sit pat at a lot of positions and like potentially have average-ish players at a lot of spots, but the ceiling of your team is still really limited if you don't have stars, if you don't have those additional wins, that are the difference between an average player and like an MVP candidate. And if that MVP candidate is not coming up through their farm system for at least the next few years, you're going to have to get one somehow. And that's just like there's not many opportunities to get one on an affordable budget. And he's like the one guy that kind of, he checks a whole lot of boxes as somebody that would improve the team a lot, could complement some of the players they already like at other positions, and also just not be that expensive salary wise.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about it, we've talked about 2022 so much and stars like Castellanos and Ramirez, and yet only a glancing reference of Brian Reynolds, who is a guy that we've talked about a lot on this show as seemingly the perfect fit in center field, right? So we think that Castellanos is the perfect fit in left field, but young, controllable, wouldn't need to pay a lot of money for him. You would have to pay a lot of prospects for him, but seems like the perfect option in terms of just a solid everyday hitter that has had a great year and that you can trade from a position of strength from. And so I think, every guy that we've mentioned should be a realistic option for the Marlins this year. They should have conversations about all these guys, about Contreras, about Reynolds, about Castellanos, about Jose Ramirez. Why not? Obviously you're playing MLB The Show if you're putting all of those guys together, and the Marlins are suddenly like a legitimate contender if all those guys are on the roster. But man,
They need three of those guys. In my opinion, they need three. They need three.
They need some of those. Like they need a significant improvement for sure at catcher and center field, and then a nice corner outfielder, I would say. And then I would love to see them add somebody in the infield just to provide more depth, to take some pressure off Miggy Rowe, take some pressure off BA.
And
but
if they do
Rowe,
Ryan Reynolds, for example, if they do Ryan Reynolds, that means they probably don't do Jose Ramirez. So it's like one free agent, one trade, and then like a catcher, you can either go Yan Gomes or go try and get Wilson Contreras.
Right.
So like it's going to be interesting to see, because the minute they do the first big move, that'll sort of like tell you where they're going to go next, whether it's free agency or another trade. So it's going to be very exciting to follow.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a huge offseason, and obviously it is the defining offseason of this regime, right? I think a lot of people are going to be all out if they don't make a significant improvement to where they're 500 playing, contending for the playoffs even next year. I'm not going to be, me personally, with the amount of improvements they need to make, if they play above 500 ball next year, I think that's a reasonable expectation. That's reasonably, like, you would feel a lot better about this club. But I know a lot of people want them to play, be in contention at this time next year.
They need to be.
And they should feel like they have to be, and it seems like they feel that way. They have immense pressure. They do have immense pressure, and it's good that they're feeling immense pressure. The last thing I want to get into, they can have the greatest team in the world, right, on paper, out in the field. But if their bullpen is as bad as it was this year, I don't know that that's going to matter. They can make all the acquisitions there that they want to. And so I'm curious. I'm looking at this bullpen right now. Bass is on the roster next year. Bender, they got to bring him back, right? Mm-hmm. Blyer, Campbell, Floro.
Love Blyer. Michael Hill deserves like an award for that one.
Yep. Hernandez, Luzardo, I think, should be a contender for the bullpen next year. Zach Thompson. Eli, pick and choose. Who are you keeping, and where else are you looking for bullpen help this winter?
Yeah, I think you named the keepers. They seem to be in this mindset. Oh, yeah,
Okert.
Yeah, Okert's interesting. I still have some reservations about him, as well as he's performed this year, about how sustainable that is. But he's a piece of it. That's this team, and a lot of teams kind of are in the same vein, where they really don't want to invest big in any one relief pitcher, just because, even more so than ever, no individual guy is even pitching that many innings. Like, most teams, especially the Marlins, are really conservative about, they rarely pitch you more than 2 days in a row, even if they really need you, right? So like it's hard to make any big investment in any one guy. I mean, that being said, they struggled so much in save situations this year. As much as I like Bender, and I've mentioned this before, like how much I like him, but he did not do well in his highest leverage situations either this year. Like, I feel like they need someone even ahead of him, kind of on the totem pole, if you're going to feel really good about what they do. So every offseason, there are a gajillion guys available via trade and via free agency. And I think they need to take that pretty seriously in terms of continuing to add from those guys. They're in a really good position, because an interesting position, I'll say, just because we know how much pitching depth they have in their organization. And we think of these guys as starters because in the minors, they're starters. Right. But realistically, I think that's the highest upside for this bullpen, is if they make the right conversions on their starting pitching depth chart. And
Jordan Holloway.
Yeah, Jordan Holloway's kind of like the first candidate that comes to mind, because
Luzardo for me personally.
Holloway pitched so well in relief this season, and at the very least, he has this really basic framework of being a reliever that he checks a lot of boxes with his stuff and with the kind of contact that he allows, that I think he could be pretty great, and that's the most likely outcome for him. I mean, going all through the system, basically any pitching prospect that you think of, the goal is you want to develop them as a starter. The realistic aspect is that those guys, most of them are going to be either inconsistent as starters, or they're just not going to be good as starters, and you need to go to a backup plan. And the question is, like, how quickly that clicks. Are those guys going to be able to make that conversion in the very first year as a reliever? Are they going to handle those high leverage situations any better than Floro or Bass does? You don't know for sure, but I mean, you could just look around baseball and all the best most of the best, like really amazing relief pitchers, they used to be starters. I mean, Liam Hendricks was in the majors as a fringy starter for a couple of years, like 6-7 years ago. Aroldis Chapman came up as a starting pitcher like a dozen years ago. Josh Hader was a starter all the way up through the minors, and they slowly specialized him as well, with very few exceptions. That's where the dominant guys come from. And more importantly for this organization, those are controllable guys. If you bring them up through your organization, they are earning the rookie minimum for the first 3 years and then slowly getting arbitration raises. Like the few relievers that you actually want to hold on to year, are going to be those success stories within your own organization. So yeah, in terms of like the best case scenario is if they pick and choose the right guys from within their own system that are at AA or AAA right now, or just like hanging on the fringes, and make those conversions. But I can't even like begin to make the call on which of those. Really, Jordan Holloway is the one name that like sticks out to me that I feel like that's going to be the best path for him. Whether he's going to like thrive in that role, I have no idea. But that's just, they do have a lot of candidates internally to make that conversion, and they got to just throw some money at somebody in free agency, some veteran reliever that's out there. That even if it doesn't work out, just this is where you take your shot. You at least make an effort to add more depth to your pen.
I've privately advocated for Jesus Luzardo to the bullpen. I think they look at Andrew Miller and look at Brad Hand, right? This organization has made that mistake twice now with lefties with big potential in the starting rotation. Obviously, it was a different time. It was a different regime, right? That was the old Florida Marlins. But man, I would really think, with that kid, the potential he has with this strikeout stuff, and he shows it for an inning or so, and he's got that big breaking ball and that big fastball. Man, would that be electric coming out of the pen? And he just can't seem to put it together as a starter. He just can't seem to get it going long enough. Like even in his starts, he's had a good 2-3 innings, but he has a bad first inning and a bad fifth inning, and then it all just kind of like comes apart. I really think they should. I don't think it's a necessity. And I know they're not going to because they traded him for Starling Marte, but I really think they should get out in front and put him in the bullpen unless he shows something in spring training that suggests this guy needs to be in the rotation next year, right? If he makes a jump like Trevor did or like Sandy did, I would get out in front and put him in the bullpen personally. I would bring back Dylan Floro personally. If you didn't trade that guy at the deadline, unless he had absolutely no value for some reason, which I thought he would, then it would not make any sense to not bring him back. Eliezer, if you don't trade him, should definitely be a bullpen guy so he can use that fastball slider combo better. And then, yeah, you're right, Eli. Obviously Holloway is the number one guy I would think should be, from internally should be in the pen next year. But when you start talking about how do they fit Meyer and Nicholas and McCambly and this one and that one and on down the line into the rotation, you don't. You pick your 5, and then the rest of them go to the bullpen. And so you're looking, you could be looking at Meyer out of the pen. While I don't think that's his ceiling, I think that's kind of the worst case scenario, right? You could be looking at Nicholas. McCambly is a fastball curveball guy, we kind of think, right? Yeah. His changeup is coming along, but obviously, if you can make him a fastball curveball guy out of the pen, it could be really, really effective. Pop, I've seen a lot of great potential from Zach Pop this year. I think he can be a nice piece in that bullpen with another year of development next year. Yep, Blyer, good lefty. Bender, I would like to see them make an addition so that he doesn't have to pitch in the 9th because he's been rough in high leverage spots. Thompson, maybe. But yeah, I would really like to see them go keep Floro around and then spend some money in free agency on the bullpen, 1 or 2 veteran arms. Isaac, real quick, man, a bullpen arm that you would keep an eye on for them. And then we'll get into predictions and wrapping up.
Really quick on Luzardo, we spoke about it on the Fish Across the Pond podcast with Peter Pratt. He's a fantastic guy and awesome viewer of our show. And just the thing about Luzardo, I agree with you, Ethan. I think you got to get ahead of the problem and put him in the bullpen, almost ASAP. But they're gonna, the Marlins, you're gonna give them every single opportunity to start. They're gonna give him every single opportunity to start. And in his starts, it seems that in the first inning is when he runs into trouble. So if you're in the bullpen, you don't have like the rest of the game to, sort of, have a good outing. If you're the bullpen, you're pitching the 8th inning and you shit the bed, that's it. You're kind of fucked. But that I would like to see him in the bullpen, especially if Edward and, the other 5 guys and Trevor and Sandy and Pablo all pitch well. And 6th, though, I think Luzardo, you don't put him in the rotation at all. I think you have him as a high leverage reliever in 2022, no doubt about it. But a guy that, it's another pipe dream that I'd be looking at is if they had Craig Kimbrell the 9th inning, man, that's just like, that'd be a dream come true, I think, for this bullpen. But I've been a proponent of just saying that the bullpen, it's in bad shape, but it's not in such bad shape, especially with all these guys like Thompson and Elliott. Well, I don't think Elliott will be here, but all these like starters converted to relievers. They have some depth to put guys there, and they're not horrible like Pop and Bender. They have good stuff, guys, and now they just need one strikeout, known commodity in the bullpen that just to solidify the back end of it. And I think they'd be in pretty good shape in the bullpen for sure.
All right, so it's prediction time, and normally we would do predictions about the series, but I'm going to scrap that for today since I kind of decide what goes on the show here. We're going to do predictions. The 3 of us, we're going to predict which, out of all the guys we've talked about today, who is on the Marlins next year. That'll be our prediction time for today. So we can put it on the line. We can put our reputation and our whatever on the line, and I'm sure this will come back to bite us in the ass at some point down the road. But Eli Sussman, your final prediction of this season, out of all the guys we've discussed on today's show, who is the one guy that you think is most likely to be on the Marlins next year?
I want to start with a quick diversion. The guys that definitely will not be here on the Marlins next season. Isan Diaz.
Yes.
It's time to go!
Sandy Leone.
It's time to go!
You stole my bit.
Magnaris Sierra.
It's time to go!
I had a couple more, but those are the ones that are definitely not going to be here next year.
These poor guys, man. I'm gonna have to
Oh my God. Do you have Alfaro's?
I did not make one. I forgot about him because he's been hurt for a while. So that's the one. Those were just those on the active roster that were top of mind that I'm tired of seeing. And there's so many directions they could go with this organization. I mean, the one that we feel most certain is going to be here at any position is Sandy Alcantara. Did we have our discussion about him as like an extension guy and how that's going?
We didn't even touch on
we
Sandy,
didn't even mention him.
Sounds like it's getting really close.
Yeah, but with Sandy Alcantara, that's the one pitcher, as much as this organization feels about their pitching depth coming up, they realize he's different. And we could spend a whole show on just how exceptional he is and how special he is. But they need to lock him up and keep him around as to lead their rotation moving forward. And all indications are they're actually going to find a way to do that. So he's going to be here next year. But he's kind of in a tier of his own on this entire roster at any position, where if they are in this situation where they want to take that huge leap forward next year, they need to be open-minded about just about everybody else in this organization right now.
So who is it? Who's here next year? You didn't even.
No, you mean that's not in the organization now, right?
Yeah. Is it Reynolds? Is it?
Okay.
Yeah. Is it Reynolds? Is it Contreras?
Okay. So the one acquisition they do make this offseason. Okay. Out of all the guys that we talked about, I think they're gonna do the Wilson Contreras thing.
Dude, you stole mine, bro.
Yeah, that I've been he checks a lot of boxes, and when it comes to the money they have available over the coming years, I think he's worth it, and they're going to pull the trigger on that.
They've been aggressive as well, attacking catcher, right? They went at Joe Mack, they went for Peyton Henry, Alex Jackson. It makes a lot of sense. Isaac, it's Wilson for you as well?
It was, but I'll do something different. Shit. Of all the guys we talked, I mean, honestly, like Wilson was the guy. I really do think that they're going to trade.
And there
for
you go.
him.
It's Wilson. And there you go. Tell us why.
Why? I mean, like Eli said, that he covers every single box you could possibly need. He has a hose behind the plate. He's played in World Series games. He has a huge, resume under his belt. He's caught, great pitchers in his career. And I think that him and Sandy matching up and Pablo, I think it'd be it'd be a hell of a tandem. And I think he would add so much value to this ball club, both defensively and offensively, and especially offensively. His power offensively is crazy, and I think he'd be a great name for us.
I'm going to say Brian Reynolds. They had discussions about him at the deadline, and the price was really high. I think the price will kind of come down in the winter, and I really think they're focused on getting their star player out in center field. That's a star player type position. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if both of them are here, because I know they're going to go out and get a starting catcher and a starting center fielder, and they might revisit that Peyton Burdick compensation. But for me, I'm going to say it's Brian Reynolds. I think that's the name they go after. Craig said today nothing should surprise us. Byron Buxton wouldn't surprise me. Cedric Mullins wouldn't surprise me. Wilson Contreras wouldn't surprise me. Castellanos all of a sudden wouldn't surprise me. I'm ready for a big offseason. And it's been, though disappointing, it's been a big season for us here at Fish Stripes. Obviously, this has just grown into something that I could have never imagined. 700 people or something watching us every night. We couldn't have done it without you, without people like Peter Pratt out in the chat. Everybody that's been engaging with us. I also couldn't have done this without you guys. Would be remiss not to mention Noah, not to mention Kevin, who were both very disappointed they couldn't make it today. Watching Kevin grow from his first show to his last show has been awesome. Watching all of us grow from what was just me and Eli sitting at the kitchen table, basically talking over some choppy video, into what it's been, these last few streams. And we had Craig Mish, Daniel Alvarez. We thought Jordan McPherson was going to join us, who was unable to. We've had some big names from Marlins coverage. Jeremy Taché, some big names from the Marlins media world join us here. And it's all thanks to you guys. You guys supported us, helped it grow. This certainly won't be the last you'll be seeing. I'm sure that in the off season there will be these types of streams as things happen. But it's just been such a pleasure, such a treat. I enjoy it every time. And again, it's all thanks to you guys. So I just wanted to thank Eli for having this idea when he came to me with this idea at the beginning of the season, when I was a kid who had never covered a team before, and I was staying home. I was taking the semester off because of COVID, and I said, I got to do something. I've got to, find a way in. And Eli gave me this opportunity to cover the team this year, and it's taken off into something I never could have imagined. I covered 10 or 15 games, something like that. Met so many great people, and it gave us this as well. So I just want to say thank you to Eli, to Isaac, to everybody that's been on with us, to the fans, Alex Carver, of course, Kevin, Noah, Daniel Rodriguez has been a great guest for us. So many people that have joined us throughout the year, so many people that have made this possible. It has been such a treat. I can't wait to do it again later, do it again next year. And who knows, maybe all of a sudden in a year or so, I'll be a guest with you guys, and you guys will keep it going. It's just been fantastic. I've loved every second of it, and I can't wait to see what it becomes. So, Eli, any final words from the man, the myth behind Fish Stripes?
You talked about the growth that we've had this season, but for me, I just think about the growth it's had like in the last 3 weeks when I figured out how to finally use this program. And for so long behind the scenes, there's just all these technical things that are making it a lot more difficult than it used to be. But as the season has winded down and there's been less at stake, I've figured out some cool things to make the production even better. But just to echo everything you said, we appreciate everybody that's tuned in and the people that have stopped by. I think most people that stop by, they stay for the whole show, which surprised me. I thought they would just like come in and dip out, but we've, thanks to you, like leading almost all these conversations, you've made it flow really well, and people don't want to leave. So that's a testament to what you did in putting this all together. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it won't be that much of a downtime. Certainly we need the Marlins to like cooperate, give us something to talk about and something to think about. There's going to be probably a little period in between where we figure out the best way to do this moving forward. So much of Fish Stripes is built a lot from the Twitter account, and for whatever reason, like over the last week, we've had some trouble integrating those comments into here. So that's the one thing that I want to figure out is we want to bring it back to make sure that we could get as much engagement as we could possibly get from the audience as you guys are tuning in. So that's the most important thing, is to make sure that people are still fun and engaged, even when they're not on the screen. But certainly we have a bunch of spaces in here to bring even more people on, and that's one thing we'll be doing for sure, is make it like a constant occurrence to bring in more special guests and to get more of those different perspectives in there. But just so much credit to all of you guys, and the ones that aren't even on the screen with us tonight, in always finding some angle to make this team worth talking about and make it interesting, even though the team like did its best to to downplay interest in it as the season has gone on, and we have overcome that. We have been successful. I think that's the easiest way to put it. Is this has been a really successful experiment, and just the start of something really cool that I like to think is something new that Marlins fans weren't getting before, and so now they can count on us and keep pushing us to make it even better.
Well, I remember, Isaac, around trade deadline time, we were talking about, man, these September streams are going to be tough, but I think they've been some of our best ones, and we just found a way to create it, and it's a credit to, like Eli said, you guys, having opinions and things being creative. So any final words from you, man?
Oh yeah, no, I just want to thank you guys, for welcoming me with open arms. The first stream I ever hopped on, you guys just literally made me feel at home right away. And my first ever game covering, I covered I'd say like maybe 10 games this year. From not knowing shit about what to do when you get there, being the only one from Fish Stripes, I have, I'm there with my dick in my hand. I have no idea what I'm doing. And to now how I am now, doing some game recaps, doing some other stuff, doing these live streams, it's just been, it's been an honor doing this with you guys, and it's been a lot of fun actually. So we hope to do this. We'll keep doing this during the off season. And yeah, credit to Eli, credit to you, Ethan, and everyone that's not here, Kevin, Alex, especially. Also, he really was really helpful with me when I first started. And yeah, it was a great season. Obviously not results wise for the major league team, but I think we've really grown this live stream on an exceptional amount, and hopefully we'll keep going.
Well, word earlier from our chief engagement officer, Noah Berger, came in that plenty of interactive stuff coming in the future for you guys. Stay involved with us. Follow us on Twitter at Fish Stripes, at Isaac Azud, I believe. I'm at Ethan Medowski, at Real Eli. Give us all a follow, interact with us. We'd love the interaction. It's what creates content. It's how we keep going. We appreciate you guys so much. And for everybody, for Alex, for Daniel, for Kevin, for Noah, for Isaac, for Eli, for all of our guests, including Chuck E. Cheese, I am Ethan Medowski, signing off for the final time, one last time on Fish Stripes Live. Go Fish.